Ryan Mason was on the touchline against United, and talked to me. What did Tottenham need to do to get their managerial situation sorted?
I've been defending, obviously, Daniel Levy for quite a few years. I've actually said that he's one of the best operators in football.
Is that going to come up on the crimes against punditry?
No, because I actually think he obviously is running probably a large part of the club correctly, but he's never let go, really, has he, of the football side? He's never dealt with that. It's a little bit similar to, say, Ed Woodward at Manchester United, who was basically driving record revenues, record profits on the business side.
Not a football guy.
But on the actual football side, they wanted to play football manager, or they wanted to be in charge of that side. So I think now, obviously, what's happened, I'm really surprised that they took that 10 days to lose Conte after that interview, and then came up with Stellini.
Yeah.
I was like, you might as well stick with Conte to the end of the season. So he goes, I'll not speak to you, just get on with it, manage the club, because that's your job. Or bring in someone that would deal with it to the end of the season. Chelsea have had a similar problem with obviously bringing Frank in. I've seen it myself. I went in at Valencia to try and steady the ship for the last 4 months, because it doesn't work. Ranieri at Man United. There's a lot of examples now of where you think you can just put someone into the end of the season thinking that it'll just basically sail the ship to shore, and it's not working. In fact, it exacerbates the situation and makes it a lot worse, and it's looked terrible in the last few weeks. I think Ryan Mason is just probably, because of his association with the club, and obviously the fact he's not a Conte man really, as probably makes it better. And you saw a response from Spurs in the second half.
Have you ever been in a situation where a manager's got a number twos come in, and do they get, from the dressing room, do they get the same level of respect, especially if they're just implementing the same ideologies and school of thought as the previous gaffer?
Well, we had a number two for 6 months, managers. We had Phil Thompson come in on the back of Gerard Houllier's. He had a heart attack in the middle of a game, so we had Phil Thompson for probably half a season. It didn't really affect us. We kept going. We had a strong title chase at that stage, up against Arsenal 2002. So it didn't change too much. And you're saying, "Oh, you're just doing the same thing," but I think in some ways that's what Tottenham have wanted to keep doing. And listen, Daniel Levy's made some really poor appointments of late, but I actually think on this one, I think it's more reading between the lines has come from the director of football who was in situ then, Paratici, who's almost probably said, Conte's press conference, it's untenable maybe, Daniel Levy's felt that, and he's probably said, well, hang on, we are fourth in the league. If we'd beat Southampton, we would have been third. So this guy knows how Conte works, we keep the same system, we do the same sort of things, this is probably the way to go. So I actually think Daniel Levy's probably looking at the situation thinking, I wish I'd have probably just done what I wanted to do. Myself, maybe bring someone else in new to the end of the season. Obviously that's Ryan Mason right now. But I'm not trying to let Daniel Levy off the hook there, because you think of the appointments of even Jose, Conte, Nuno coming in. This is all on the back, I think, of when he put Jose in originally, him coming out with a statement saying, we want to get back to the values of Tottenham, how the game's played, being an attacking, team or coach. And we always say that's like the Tottenham way, got to play great football. I always remember that when I was a kid. But right now, that's everybody's way. Yeah. That's everyone's way at the top level, how teams want to play. So to then go and appoint Nuno, then appoint Conte, and find himself in a situation where with Stellini, it just didn't look right. When you're looking at him on the side of the pitch, when you're listening to him interviewed, we're in studios watching that and we're shaking our heads looking at it, because we're putting ourselves back in the dressing room and thinking, what are the players thinking when you're watching him do an interview? What's he going to be like on the training pitch trying to get his message across? And it never felt right. So we don't know who's chosen that decision, but as I said, I think it probably had a bit to do with the director of football, and they've just got to try and get on to the end of the season. Now, are they going to bring someone else? Who can you bring in right now? They're obviously still trying to get a manager for next season, not right now.
On Stellini, though, he wouldn't want to be there, because the last thing he wants to do is look like he's being disloyal to Conte, who he's serving. So actually, they forced him to stay. He wouldn't want to be there. He wanted out. It was really badly handled, that sort of Conte situation. It was coming for months, a bit like Jose's situation at United. These situations don't just happen overnight. You can just simmer along. And I think that to deal with it in the way in which they did was really poor.
There was a period where Conte was away.
We saw that.
And you saw the results. We saw us beat West Ham at home, Chelsea, Man City, the all-conquering Man City. We beat them at home under Stellini. So you could see there was some sort of logic in keeping him in place, but it was clear as soon as Conte was gone that it was all falling apart, not more so than Newcastle, where he decided to play a back four with two defenders and Porro and Perisic as fullbacks, which is when I saw that, I was like, this is going to be a disaster. But if we concede less than 3, we've done really well. And you saw us concede 5 in 20 minutes. So, yeah. So there's that. But in terms of who I want, obviously I want Pochettino back because why is that funny?
Because he's going to Chelsea. That's why.
Yeah, but you're asking.
Who would you want?
Who do I want? My question was, who do I want? He's not a job. That's who I want. If he's going to Chelsea, then what's being rumoured? It's
Who's realistic?
Nagelsmann is realistic for Tottenham Hotspur.
Vincent Kompany's in the mix.
No,
I love Vincent. I love Vincent Kompany. I love the way he conducts himself in interviews. He comes across as a leader, someone who would take responsibility if things are not going wrong. If things are going wrong. The biggest issue.
You've had some of the best managers in world football, and you seem to just ruin their reputations every time.
Yeah.
So what? And I'm being serious. What manager actually thinks, okay, I could go in and actually do a really good job?
Yeah, probably a deluded one.
It's a tough job.
But the fact is, Tottenham are a massive draw to these managers. The fact that we're even in a position, I'm very much moving towards a place where Daniel Levy needs to step back or sell up. Not that that's going to happen, but what got us to this point is large parts of the great work he's done previously, right? Not where we are now, but what we've done previously, so that we can attract managers like Pochettino, like Jose Mourinho, Conte, and now Nagelsmann. Most of the people in this room don't want Nagelsmann to come to Tottenham. They don't understand that. They don't understand how a club like Spurs can attract one of the brightest managers in Europe. But it could happen, could well happen. So Nagelsmann and Rangnick as a director of football.
Let's talk about Tottenham's type of manager. And the managers you've mentioned, you've said they've ruined their reputation. But I was talking before about them not being the right fit in terms of maybe how they play football. But Tottenham have got to look at sort of probably Liverpool and Arsenal and how they've gone about challenging. Those teams have sort of been built through Klopp, each year getting better. Arsenal under Arteta, 4 or 5 years. Think of what Pochettino done. Jose Mourinho and Conte have to win right now. Tottenham are not a club who can win right now. It's got to be a building process, and they get closer each year, and they're improving. So when you talk about what type of manager they need, there's talk of Vincent Kompany, whether he could be that man. Who knows? He may go on to be a great manager. I think it's far too early for him in terms of talking like this. And the reason I say that, I look at sort of 2 managers who, sort of Steven Gerrard and Frank Lampard, who are 2 of the best players we've seen in the Premier League era. Vincent Kompany's the same. There's almost this rush, and before we go any further, I know Guardiola goes against the grain. I get that. But there's almost like this rush to get these top players into these big jobs. I don't know if it'd be too early for Kompany for the Tottenham, but what's this rush? Let him build his CV, his experience, his ups and downs. It didn't go that well in Belgium for him, let's be honest. Burnley's been amazing. I just think for managers, there's no rush to get these big name footballers in at the top, because once it doesn't go well there, where'd you go from there? The building process for a young manager is to, eventually be there competing year in, year out for trophies, the Champions League. I think we've just got to be careful with these top players being desperate, as a media, as a fan base, to go, right, we want this manager in. I think it'd be far too early for Vincent Kompany.
You say that, but then Arsenal's was his first head coaching role, managerial role for Arteta, where he'd only ever been a number 2 to Pep. Does it also, I guess, how important is the character of the player? Because some players they look at and you go, he's going to be a manager. Or you listen to the kind of tactical nous that Arteta has, and you listen to the players speak about this. He was always going to be a manager. He was always a student of the game.
Arteta
and I don't know whether
at a lot of clubs.
Yeah.
Would have got any other big 6 club. He would have got sacked.
Their own fans wanted him sacked, so you probably wanted him sacked early on. But what's attractive about what Arteta's done at Arsenal, from a Spurs perspective, is the fact that it's a project and it isn't Jose Mourinho and it isn't Conte. It's something that the club can build and move organically forward and become, hopefully, a more.
Will Daniel Levy and will the
club.
Spurs fan give a potential manager who has to build the time that they need? Because
no, I hear this all the time, and I'm not having it. This thing about every manager should be given time. Let's not be naive about this. It's not happening for anyone. And you're saying about Arteta could have lost his job. But what Arteta did in that first 6 months bought him time. He won big games. He won the FA Cup, not by getting an easy run. I think he beat Chelsea in the final. He beat Man City in the semi-final. I think they beat Liverpool, that was the best Klopp team around that era. He won big games. He bought himself time with that FA Cup. So the season after, where it doesn't go well, He's got that in the bank behind it. So this idea that any manager he's got to be given 4 years, let him get on with the job. It's wrong. It's not.
You want to be seeing progress for sure.
You've got to see something. You've got to buy into something.
It's the same with Pochettino. It wasn't an immediate success, but you could see it was like when Arsenal lost to Man City. Rodri scored that goal late on, and Arsenal fans are singing from the rooftops, and the Spurs fans are like, "We lost. Why are you singing?" But they saw what the future might hold and how they beat Manchester, how they lost, but performed valiantly and actually controlled a lot of the game. If you can see a direction and see a plan in place, then you're much more comfortable as a fan. Yeah. What we've had at Spurs for too long, and Daniel Levy is directly responsible for this, is a rudderless operation where it just feels like we don't know where we're going.
I'm amazed at Daniel Levy in his appointments of Jose, Nuno and Conte. I mean, maybe try it once, because I think you could say, OK, I've got a desperation, we've got the new stadium, we need to get into the Champions League, there's a financial need that we must have a manager who we know can deliver. But he'd seen what had happened with Jose at Manchester United. This wasn't going to be a shock to him. You know Conte's exactly the same. Nuno's football at Wolves, I think Nuno's a good coach, but I think ultimately you knew the football was not going to be a level up from Jose's football. I'm really surprised at his last 3 managerial appointments in terms of fit. Just all unlikely marriages that you just know are going to end up in tears and divorce. So from that point of view, I'm struggling to understand what's happened in the last 3 or 4 years. I can only think it's the desperation behind the scenes of the finances, the debt repayments, and maybe the big owner of, Joe Louis saying you need to qualify for Champions League, because that financial drop between Champions League and Europa League is huge. And obviously Tottenham are not going to make it potentially this year.
I don't agree with that. I think that.
So why has he appointed those 3 coaches then?
Because
what's happened to Daniel Levy?
I think well, Daniel Levy's either going to pass the buck to Paratici for hiring Conte, but ultimately it is Daniel Levy's responsibility.
You can say
he's structured the debt so that it isn't as significant as people might think. The stadium repayments are manageable, and it isn't going to be reliant on Champions League football. That's widely reported.
It will have a knock-on effect on your transfers and stuff.
Yeah, but you're talking like £20 million a season.
Just bought a go-kart track under the stadium. We're talking about finance.
But it's a great point. Daniel Levy, what he's best at is that commercial commercial
He's
aspect.
a great off-the-pitch operator.
And he should be allowed to do that.
What he's done with the stadium and the training ground is incredible.
Do you think getting to the Champions League final, though, do you think he looked at that and thought that's the beginning rather than the end? Because in reality, that was the peak of that side. But if you get there's a little delusion that comes with it and goes, if we can just get a manager who's a bit more experienced, he'll be able to take that group of players and take them that one step further.
That was the idea with Jose. You just thought, can Poch or these players get over the line? Not necessarily the Champions League, but in a cup final. They just needed to. That team needed to win something, didn't they? And I think
we have to be real and say Spurs are a massively attractive football club. They attract Beyonce to perform. But on my mum's going, she's going to love it. The stadium's fantastic. On a sporting level, Pochettino needed 250 million quid spent after that Champions League final. And Spurs, as a footballing operation, a massive football club, didn't respect Pochettino, didn't respect the football aspect of the football club enough. It's an entertainment product, Spurs. That's the issue.
And they thought that they could just bring a winning manager in to get them over the line. But they actually forgot that Poch got them to the line.
You can understand the logic.
Mourinho ain't getting them to.
But you can't. The second time with Conte, it was the second mistake, really. It's Nuno and then Conte that I think Jose maybe you try it once, but then United, to be fair to United, when everyone was clamouring for Conte, right, and they'd had Jose, the club held strong and said, no, we can't have that again because we know what's going to happen. So to be fair, they held. I can't believe Daniel Levy has gone down that route again.
Yeah, well, he's definitely that. I mean, it was a mistake.
But is there a bit where all of a sudden Conte's answering phone calls, and previously it was like Sherwood was answering phone calls, and they're like, oh, Conte wants to speak to me.
I think there is an element of that. So we can get Antonio Conte, who's won everywhere. To your point, we break managers, right? Really good ones, and that's what's happened previously. But there's no way of when we got Jose Mourinho, I was like,
rephrase that. I think managers break you as well.
Right.
Because honestly, I think what look, seriously, because I think what Jose and I've said this about Rafa Benitez a couple of times. What Jose and Conte do, they turn everyone on each other, and they end up breaking your culture, your club as well. So for me, don't just think there that we destroy managers. Those managers are capable in the power that they have with the media to destroy your club as well. So I think Spurs is a great club. What Levy's done with the stadium and the training ground means that you're set up for a great manager to come in. Has Nagelsmann turned down Chelsea with the fact that he would prefer to manage Tottenham? Has that happened?
No.
Because I think Chelsea went for Nagelsmann.
I don't think so.
They did.
Nagelsmann
He
pulled
turned-
out
he
of
turned them down.
the race because
why did you pull out
I
of
think he said he
Chelsea?
didn't want to
Because he
be
wasn't
manager
first choice.
mid-season, didn't he?
Yeah,
wasn't
but
first choice for
I
Chelsea.
don't
I
think
think
he would
he
have.
got the vibes that it looked like
I can't-
I
Pochettino.
think they made him
I-
come in 3 times and he said, you know what, I'm done. I've got
I
Luis
can't
Enrique.
see him saying, you know what, I'd rather go to Spurs.
Chelsea didn't
Don't
want
think
to
that's
put in
what
a
I think.
skateboard ramp.
Well, I mean, why not? Why not?
Why not?
Look at the state of your football.
No, I know we're a state, and we'll get into that in a minute. We're not talking
about
about
to,
us
yeah,
yet.
that's
Yeah,
right.
just
We actually are.
let me
You know
breathe.
what, that's probably a good time to go
There's
on
obviously
to
massive dissent at the moment around obviously Enoch and Daniel Levy.
Yes, there is, yeah.
So in terms of that, is it a case of now it's an absolute majority of the football club want the ownership to change?
So we, on my podcast, The Fighting Cock, we put a poll out, right? We got a sizable response on it, and it was one in 4 wanted Enoch to, or Daniel Levy, they're 2 different things, but to be removed.
One in 4?
1 in 4 wanted him to stay.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay, so it's 75% wanted him out.
On Twitter, which isn't absolutely representative of matchday going fans. So yesterday you heard them singing Daniel Levy, Get Out of My Club. It probably was, I don't know, it sounded like maybe half the stadium. It was difficult to tell, but it's so much more significant than it was a year ago. And there are movements. It's very sporadic, and there needs to be a bit of a more organisation online about how the pressure is put on the club. But there are movements springing up around social media that are trying to force this thing.
I mean,
Someone's got to come up with-
Gary will teach you how to lead one. I think that's probably...
Someone's got to come up with £5 billion